everyone. Welcome to episode 12 of Open Books with Alana and Erin, two female leaders modernizing the leadership space. So, our past episodes, we've been talking about devoting, our time to work and how do you find that balance between, personal life and work. And it led us to then start thinking about, why does it matter? Why does it matter who you have as a leader? Why does it matter what type of leader you are? And why does it matter how you're spending your days, right? We spend so much time at work, regardless of what industry you're in. For those, who have an outside career, you spend a lot of time at work. So to start with, why does it matter? Are we overcomplicating what work should be to someone? Are we overcomplicating that, do you think?
I think overcomplicating, no.
Yeah.
Is it complicated? Yes,
Yep.
because we're human. And humans, surprisingly, are complicated. So I think we ourselves are not overcomplicating it. I think we are thinking about things that have not necessarily been thought about 50 years ago, 75 years ago. The world is significantly more connected, and the type of work has changed. If you think about going from like industrial revolution, manufacturing, like factory labor to now you are doing a lot of service labor, in the US at least, we're service market basically. And that involves people talking to people. Humans are complicated, therefore the work is going to be very complicated as well. Not that they didn't also have management issues back in the day. But I think it has become more profound now. And with the rise of social media and just the global connection altogether, more people are asking their coworkers, their connections online, what kind of leaders they have. It's no longer just a silo of you and your coworkers. You can now talk to everyone, which I think is a good thing. It forces us all to be better and to consider things that weren't considered in the past. But that there can be that sense of overcomplicating when really, to me, we're just complicated people.
Totally.
How about you?
I would say no, we're not overcomplicating. I think, to your point, it's a complex world out there, right? So we have to meet the world where it's at.
Exactly.
But I think, too, sometimes that phrase of, like, we're just overcomplicating things can be used to kind of just turn a blind eye to where the world is out now. And so I think it's easy to say, like, all of this is just additional fluff. Like, it doesn't belong in the professional world or in an industry. But I think that's detrimental to your business to think that, especially with so many people now wanting to have some sort of a connection to work, wanting to have a connection to the leader that they have and believe in a greater mission. I think to pretend that that's not real, I think is only going to do yourself and your business a disservice. I also think leadership itself is just becoming more studied, to be honest. Many years ago, there maybe weren't as many like leadership styles, or people weren't diving into what leadership is. And I think it's becoming more of a studied subject, I would say.
Totally agree.
And so it's like, the more you learn, you find out other ways. You kind of add it to your backpack of tools. Like, you have more exposure to different ways of doing things. And I think that just adds to the complexity that you bring at work.
Yeah. I mean, I would even say 15 years ago, also we were younger, maybe not fully into the career space. And I knew there were like self-help type management books, but it feels like there's just an influx of such a variety of types of leadership. And a lot of them are similar or pull like some techniques from others. And then there's the very like authoritarian type leadership. But it does feel like the number of discussed leadership styles has definitely increased over the past 15 years. Also, 15 years ago, I was not interested in learning leadership, so it very well could have been. I was just not aware of it. So take this with a grain of salt.
No, I totally agree. Yeah, it definitely changes as your career kind of progresses, like what you're diving into as well.
Yeah.
Yep. Totally.
Side story. We recently got a new Barnes and Noble in our town.
We did.
And
it doesn't have a coffee shop though.
It does not. It's pretty small for a Barnes and Noble, I would say. But it's very exciting.
Yeah.
So of course, me and my husband went, and I like beelined for the business management leadership section, and Francis, my husband, was like, "Who are you? What are you? Are you really reading these?" And I'm like, "Yes. Normally you just don't see them because they're on electronic format or audiobooks." And he's like, "I should have known."
So I listen to a lot of audiobooks when I'm like getting ready in the morning because our bathroom has a speaker or something.
Yeah.
And so when my husband comes to say goodbye to me, he's like, "You're either trying to save the world with a new leadership style, or I'm listening to some sort of like reality show catch up or something." He's like, I know. And he's like, I never really know what I'm walking into. But he'll just catch like a snippet of it. God. Oh well.
Yeah. Oh. Yeah. But I will say, like, I do think that section at libraries or Barnes and Nobles, it just seems like it's quite large now, and I don't remember it being that large when I was younger.
That's a good point. And I think the authors and the people who are diving into leadership, like there just seems to be more and more, of them. And I guess I would say like you can find a style that speaks to you in that way to continue learning. Yeah.
There is I know this is slightly off topic. Yeah. I hope that in like the next 5 to 10 years, we see more women and people of color, more minorities writing books, because it still seems to be predominantly white people and white men specifically, which is, I mean, if you look at leadership over the years, that's been the stereotype. But I really do hope we get more diversity in that. Maybe we'll write one.
That would be fun.
Have you ever thought about it?
Is it like a picture book?
You can draw the pictures. They'll be stick figures.
Well, and I guess to that point, I think just like humans in general are being studied more as well. Mm-hmm. And so much of who we are, like, as a whole person, totally dictates like our mechanisms and our coping strategies as leaders. Mm-hmm. And so I think even just humans in general being studied more leads to leadership being more studied as well, I would say.
I totally agree.
Yep. So with that, as leaders, why does it matter who our leader is and who we have as a leader?
So I don't think many people would disagree. The tone always starts at the top.
Yeah. The
tone of whatever business you're in. We definitely see it in accounting. Yeah. The tone at the top is huge in coloring everyone's reality. So I think it's extremely important to have someone who is setting that expectation of servant leadership or that support from the top, and then it feeds down to everyone. Sometimes if you're in a really large organization, maybe that isn't quite as direct. So like I'm in a smaller organization and you can definitely see the trickle down effect from CEO to accountant, right? You can see how that leadership flows down. In a larger organization where maybe you have your executive suite and then you have all of your directors or VPs and then you have more management and more management.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like Microsoft, HP, like huge organizations, Google. It's more probably the direct report managers whose tone is going to trickle down. But if you are a toxic individual or just grumpy all the time, cranky or very authoritarian, or that's going to trickle down to your staff, whether you want it to or not. You can't control that. So it's extremely important, in my opinion, to be very aware of what kind of leader we are being and how that is trickling down to our team.
Yeah.
What would you say?
Yeah, I would agree that acknowledging that your leader does have an impact on your day, I think is probably the first step and very important. I think also all of us want to feel some sort of connection to how we're spending so much of our time.
Yeah.
We don't want to be isolated, feeling like we're on an island. Maybe every couple days, it's nice to have like a disconnect, but in general, humans want to have a connection to other people, or a connection to a greater mission. And so I think so much of that feeds off of our leaders, and we want to feel like we care and that we matter and somebody's invested in us, and that if we don't show up to work one day, that somebody's going to care where we're at.
Yeah.
And so I think I see it as it just boils down to a human need for connection. And when you're spending so much time at work, that feeds into your professional life.
Yeah. Especially in our industry of accounting. Something that really kind of opened my eyes to the effect that leadership can have was probably in my second or third tax season. It was like right up to the deadline, and I think the weekend before, and a bunch of us were there on a Sunday, including our branch manager. And he was there. He got pizza for everyone, which there's this whole thing about pizza parties. This was like but it was Sunday. We were almost to the deadline, and he was there struggling with us, supporting us. And there was a huge, like almost everyone in the office was there. And that feeling of he cares, he sees that all of us are working our asses off. Pardon my language. And he was acknowledging that. And the fact that we were all together definitely did not feel like I was on an island. I felt like we were all chugging along together. And it made those last couple of days before the deadline like bearable.
I bet.
And it was kind of one of those turning points where I was like, oh, a leader, it's not just management. It's someone leading you all together. It sticks out in my mind. I remember it very vividly as something that I miss being fully remote.
Sure.
Because we don't get that same, we're all here together chugging along. So trying to replicate that is really difficult in the remote world.
Well, and I think to your point of that's when you were in a physical location and now you're remote, I think even just relating that back to how we opened this episode, asking if we're overcomplicating things, and you had brought up the world is more complex, purely just physical versus remote and hybrid. Like, I think there's also so much discussion about how you lead in those environments, because in a remote firm, you can't have everyone in the office and rally together, and have a happy hour or have a pizza party. You can't have that physical interaction or physical observation. And so I think that just feeds back to the world is more complex. We have to find other ways to do things. And that's where a lot of this starts with those discussions and how are other people doing it. Which is really important.
It so is.
Yep, totally. So to that effect, how do we keep the perspective for our team leads of our team of keeping in mind it's important, who we're working for, the work that we are doing, how do we help our team with their perspective on that?
So I think it's hard because a lot of it comes from inside.
Yeah.
I think if we start out being supportive and kind of hopefully showing by example, like this is how we're supporting you, please go and support your team
Yeah.
that way, is one of the better ways. It's also making sure that you are promoting the right people to that role that have that want and that need to be supporting of their team.
Yeah.
I think it's really difficult, and I think we've seen this in the accounting industry specifically, and probably other professional services too, where you have someone who's very, very good technically, and they're promoted up to manage people, and then aren't really interested in managing people, and so it that affects the team. So I think first and foremost, it's promoting the right people, hiring the right people for that position, and not promoting someone who isn't going to perform well in that space. Not that there isn't space where they can be successful in the firm.
Yeah.
You don't want to lose sight of some progression for that person. But I think for me, that's kind of how best I have done it and how I've seen it work best. I'm really curious what you would say, though.
I'm similar in that I think we definitely have to just model it as leaders.
Mm-hmm.
And so I definitely talk about, like, I'm passionate about the firm I'm at, the people I do the work for, the people I work with. I'm also very passionate about our clients, and we are all servicing, our firm's clients.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think for me, it just starts with me modeling that behavior. And like you said at the beginning, the tone at the top, I'm trying to set that, for my teams of just where my passion comes from. Because it's important, especially in public accounting, but in any other industry where people are client facing, that the clients also feel like we have a passion for what we're doing for the client, or we have a passion to see them succeed. We're a partner with them. I think so much of that can bleed into a client-facing role. And so I totally agree that it matters who you're promoting to create that tone for everyone, because no matter the dynamic that they have or the role that they have in the firm, that passion has to feed into other people, whether it's internally or with their clients as well.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought up the client side, because that is where a lot of us start, like being accountants or being in the law industry or something. Like, you're working with clients, and keeping them is part of why we have a job. So like, that's a great place to start identifying and nurturing those behaviors in the team members. Some people are good at it. Some people are naturals. Some people learn over time. But I think that setting that example, tone at the top, is so key. Because it affects everyone.
Yeah, it totally
more
does.
than you think it does.
Yep.
It
totally
always
does.
surprised me. Way back in previous careers, I worked, I think I've said, at a video game store, and we had a manager at one point who was miserable all the time, and it made, like, no one wanted to work with that manager, but they were a manager, so they were there a lot. And so, like, when I was doing the scheduling, we'd make sure to schedule the right people. So you had support. You had at least one other person there to be like, let's not be miserable together.
Totally.
And it was crazy how that affected how we talked to the customers coming in the door, how we talked to the other stores, because it was franchise. So it is so... And you can still see that today. I saw it back then as an 18, 19-year-old, and you can still see it happening just out there in general.
To that point, there's Brene Brown did a podcast, and she invited Simon Sinek and Adam Grant on. And one of my our mentor, actually sent it to me. I'll have to send it to you. We should post the link because it's an incredible 2-part podcast. But they really were just kind of like spitballing together just about like various leadership topics. It was so interesting to listen to. And the idea they brought forward was that you can't have a high performer who's toxic. Part of being a high performer is making others better.
Oh,
and
yeah.
I was like, such a light bulb for a lot of us. And so then we, started thinking about, okay, being a high performer, you have to be able to answer the question, how did you help someone else? Because I think sometimes that's lost.
Yeah.
Even, sometimes as leaders, we get so into the mode of just getting things done. But it's like, how are you impacting other people while you're getting really great things done? And it was just such an interesting thought to consider and start working into being able to answer that question, even just for me.
We should do an episode about like what high performers actually are, because I think there is a huge disconnect between there's like the technical high performer and then there's an employee who is a high performer. We'll need to discuss this more. We could talk about this significantly.
I know, we could go totally
longer.
off the original message. But we'll have to circle back around to this. And what I would say is everyone should go listen to that podcast because it's so incredible to hear them spitball and talk through.
We'll definitely include it in the description of this episode.
Yeah, totally will.
Oh,
hopefully
I'm so
they don't
excited.
mind.
I don't think they will.
They probably don't know. So what's something that you've learned from your team, a colleague, mentor, about answering this question, why it matters where we work and who we do the work for? What's something you've learned along the way?
I think it's been kind of an accumulation of stuff from team members and mentors along the way. There has to be a passion for people. And I don't think accountants normally think that, but we're working with clients every day. Like, there should be a passion for working with people to be in our industry, maybe public accounting specifically, because you are working with the public. And when I first entered, I'm kind of going to answer the what would I tell myself back then as well. Because when I first entered the industry, going to school and everything, you're learning just all the number stuff. And even then, like, could I figure out a debit credit when I came out of school? I mean, I could put numbers in there, whether they were right or not.
Then you just flip it. Then you just go back and change the journal entry.
I mean, I still do that. So.
If it's negative, shoot, wrong way.
Wrong way. But that was not what I did not expect to have so much of what I did be surrounded by people, which worked out really well for me because I really like people. But that was not what was expected. And I think that is something that we should be more open about in the industry is, hey, we focus on people. People are complicated. People are complex. Businesses are complex, like, because you're dealing with people. And that's kind of what I learned over the years, either from observing or being involved in meetings, just seeing how each person interacted with the clients and the employees, that there really needs to be some kind of passion for people.
That's so interesting that you bring that up because it's true. I think for so many, accounting is pretty black and white. Like, it's numbers driven. You're trying to get to some sort of result, some sort of calculation. Your financials, journal entry has to do something specific in the books. And so I think then when you layer on, okay, but we're working with people. And things aren't going to come in like you would expect them to, or you're really going to have to like think through a certain scenario. Like, you're not just going to be given the here's the debit and here's the credit you record, or here's the exact support document you're looking for. And so much of our value comes from the conversations we
Yeah.
have with our clients. And I think that's where probably in many industries, that's where the value comes from.
Yeah.
And if you can't talk with someone, you know, or have a passion for wanting to, it changes things just a little bit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
That might I like the way you said wanting to.
Yeah.
So a passion for wanting to
Yep.
interact with people or like help people not be better, but fulfill their goals
Yes.
or,
Yep.
because there can be the want for it and just not the knowing how.
Totally.
And I think there are a lot of accountants out there who are actually really good with people,
Yes.
but they think they aren't because
Yeah.
they're numbers people. And so they may not know that, yeah, they actually kind of do have a passion for people.
Yep.
Because when they get in talking, like, okay, what are your goals? What are your
Yep.
financial goals? What are you trying to do?
Yeah.
They're super involved.
Right.
But they don't realize it because they've been told accountants aren't people. So,
Totally. That's how we're portrayed.
so yeah, I don't think a lot
Yeah.
of us realize that we truly do have a passion
Totally.
for humans and people in general.
Well, and like you said, that's not a course that you take.
No.
You know, when you're studying accounting and everything. So yeah, I think that probably gets lost for ourselves, but then just the perception of who we are to others as well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, that's really interesting.
What have you learned from either team, mentor,
Yeah.
colleague?
I've learned, and I think this is pretty basic, but I've learned like what you're looking for in your career changes
Oh,
as your life evolves. And so your connection to work, you know, and what you want to get out of work, that'll change as your life continues on. And that's just part of being a human and evolving. But it could change, you know, who you're doing the work for and why you're wanting to do it, or you might get exposure, you know, to some other area that you find, oh, I really have a passion for that.
Yeah.
And so the drivers for what you're looking for in that connection or in that work team member relationship might change because
Yeah.
of that, which is interesting.
I think it's such a, I mean, I have experienced this.
Yeah. Yep.
As we age and
Yeah.
get older and our life experience changes,
Yes.
we all change. Again, we're complicated people.
Right.
And I love that that's like the verbal takeaway.
Yeah.
Because when you're early in your career, it is very hard to realize
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
I mean, I know I was very judgmental
Yeah.
in my early career of people whose goals and ideas and what they wanted to do
Yep.
were not the same as mine.
Yeah.
But they were also in different stages of their lives.
Right.
I don't know what their external life is like.
Right.
Maybe there's something else going on there, but like it's okay to change.
Yep.
And it's okay for not everyone to be the exact same.
Totally. And I think to that point, it's important as leaders to be checking in with your team
Yes.
about what they're wanting to be sure that everything is in alignment. And if it's not, to start working through that.
Yeah.
You know, in however that may look for the employee. I think that's really important.
And then that circles back to the tone at the top that that's okay to have goals that shift and change. And it's all right. It happens to us all.
Yep. And I think too, when you're starting in your career, you're not seeing that many of us work for 30, 35, 40 years. And so what you're trying to get in and get a job. And so that's what your priority is. Cool. So now I have the job. Welcome to the next 40 years. You know, like it's okay that in 40 years, things drastically change for you. And things ebb and flow with the season of your life. And so I think it's just important, not only as team members, but then just as leaders of team members, that we keep that in mind.
Yeah.
It's really important.
Is that something you would share with your younger self, or do you have a different answer for that?
Yeah, that's a good question. Good segue, I would
Thank
say.
you. Well, I already kind of answered it.
Yeah,
so.
you did both. So you're like, come on, hurry up. Yeah. What I would tell myself is there's that old, or I guess that common statement of a work-life balance. And I have realized it's not just a work-life balance. I see it more as an integration. And so work is a part of my life. Life is a part of my work. when I started in my career, I tried to keep things pretty siloed. And that was pretty unsustainable because that's a lot to like, okay, I have to shut off, but I love my work so much. So I like flipping that switch just wasn't as easy for me. But once I started to adapt the mindset of like more of that integration, it made me see like what I'm doing at work impacts my personal life impacts my work. And so I would just talk myself through that idea of just that work-life balance can create for me, it just created an odd expectation that wasn't super sustainable the longer I went on in my career.
That's so interesting.
Yeah.
My early career was very different. It was they weren't siloed, but I let the work take over everything.
Totally.
So rather than just trying to keep them separate, it was just all work all the time.
Totally.
Which is not healthy. Would not recommend it.
Yeah. 0 out of 10
great
would
way
recommend.
great way to exacerbate any mental health issues you may
Burnout.
have.
And I should add to that, having boundaries on both ends, right?
Yes.
Like personal life and work, still having those boundaries, but just acknowledging that there's probably more integration than just totally siloed.
Well, and how many times has something frustrating happened at work? Because it happens.
Yep.
And then you bring that outside, no matter how hard you try, it's going to affect your home life. And being angry that it's affecting your home life is even worse. But if you acknowledge that, hey, this is what happened today, it's going to affect my home life. I will tell Francis, like, hey, it was not a great day today. I know I'm not going to be that great, like, in a mental space this evening. So I might just need some space, or like, if I'm short with you, it's not you. But acknowledging that there are some, I like the term you use, integration, because they are going to affect each other.
Totally.
Whether you think they are or not, and trying to keep them totally separate, I think can be very difficult.
Totally can. If you could put on like another brain to go home, that's what I would need. To keep them totally siloed, I would have to like completely switch my headspace. Which
it's probably healthy. I don't know. On one hand, I could think it would be healthier to be able to just switch off.
Sure. But do you think maybe that's a little bit of dissociation? If you're like 100%, like, whoop, and now you're in your personal life, you might have, I don't know, I'm not a therapist. I'm not trained in any of that, believe me. But I wonder if that's a level of like completely disassociating with what you just went through over the last 8 to 10 hours.
In the end, it's probably a good idea to have a therapist.
For everyone, right?
Yes.
That's our ending message.
Yes.
Go get a therapist.
Get a therapist if you don't have one.
Exactly. Thanks, everyone, for tuning in to Open Books. We aim to share insights gained from our past and future experiences to foster growth within the leadership and accounting communities. See you next time.
Thanks.
Bye.